I never imagined that the greatest betrayal of my life would come not from strangers, not from enemies, but from the people who shared my blood. For most of my life, my family looked normal from the outside. Holidays together. Smiles in photos. Warm words in public. But behind closed doors, everything was very different. My mother was the only person who truly protected me. She was strong, intelligent, and independent. She built her life from nothing, worked relentlessly, and never relied on anyone. While others talked, she acted. While others complained, she planned. And she always told me one thing. Never trust words. Trust actions. At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. My mother's secret. When my mother became seriously ill, everything changed. Doctors, hospitals, quiet conversations in hallways. The kind of silence that makes your heart beat louder than your thoughts. One evening, she asked me to sit beside her bed. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were serious. She told me she had prepared everything. A will. Documents. Accounts. Investments. She looked straight at me and said, "If something happens to me, everything I own belongs to you." I was shocked. She explained that over many years, she had quietly built significant wealth. Real estate. Investments. Savings. The total amount was $7.8 million. I couldn't speak. I didn't even know what to say. She made me promise one thing. Never tell the family. Not until everything was legally transferred. I promised. That promise changed my life forever. After the funeral. My mother passed away 3 months later. The funeral was crowded. Relatives I hadn't seen in years suddenly appeared. They cried loudly. They hugged me. They told me how much they loved my mother. Something felt wrong. Their tears ended too quickly. Their questions came too soon. What will happen to the house? Did she leave anything? Who is handling the money? I said I didn't know. That was the moment they stopped seeing me as family. They started seeing me as an obstacle. The trap. A week later, my uncle offered to help me with legal paperwork. He said it was too complicated for someone like me. My aunt suggested I move temporarily, until everything is sorted out. My cousins became unusually friendly. I was grieving. Exhausted. Broken. And I trusted them. That was my mistake. They convinced me to sign documents I didn't fully understand. They told me it was routine. Just temporary authorization. In reality, I was signing away control. Piece by piece. The truth. Months later, when I finally went to a lawyer on my own, the truth destroyed me. The accounts were empty. The properties had been transferred. The investments were gone. Everything. The people who stole my inheritance were sitting at family dinners, smiling at me, asking how I was doing. They didn't just steal money. They stole my mother's life work. They stole my future. They stole my trust. Betrayal cuts deeper than poverty. I wasn't just financially ruined. I was emotionally shattered. I replayed every conversation. Every smile. Every moment I ignored my instincts. I remembered my mother's words. Trust actions. Their actions had spoken loudly. The fight back. I didn't give up. I gathered evidence. Emails. Messages. Documents. Dates. Transfers. I worked 2 jobs. I sold personal belongings. I educated myself about the law. The legal battle took years. Years of stress. Years of loneliness. Years of nights where I questioned whether justice still existed. Some relatives turned against each other. Lies collapsed. Greed exposed itself. Not all the money came back. But the truth came out. And sometimes, that matters even more. What I learned. Today, I live a different life. A quieter one. A stronger one. I learned that family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty. I learned that grief makes you vulnerable, and predators know that. And I learned that my mother was right all along. Money can be stolen. Integrity cannot. Final words. If you're listening to this story and thinking, this could never happen to me, I thought the same. Protect yourself. Ask questions. Read every document. And never underestimate how far greed can push people, even those who call you family. After I discovered the truth, I couldn't sleep for weeks. Every night, I lay awake replaying everything in my head. The conversations. The smiles. The moments when something inside me whispered that something was wrong, and I ignored it. What hurt the most wasn't the money. It was the realization that my own family had planned this. Slowly. Carefully. Without mercy. They waited for my weakest moment. And they took advantage of it. How deep the betrayal went. As I started digging deeper, I uncovered things I never expected to find. Emails between my uncle and a lawyer I had never met. Messages where my relatives discussed timelines, not for mourning, but for transferring assets. Documents prepared even before my mother passed away. They knew. They had always known. They just needed me to be quiet, obedient, and broken. And for a while, I was exactly that. Isolation. When I confronted them, the masks finally fell. They didn't apologize. They didn't deny it. They blamed me. They said I was too young to manage that kind of money. That my mother would have wanted the family to decide. That I should be grateful they left me anything at all. That was the moment I realized something important. They never saw me as her child. They saw me as a problem to solve. Losing more than money. Friends disappeared when they heard about lawsuits and stress. Some said I should just let it go. Others hinted that maybe I misunderstood. But I didn't misunderstand empty accounts. I didn't misunderstand forged signatures. I didn't misunderstand betrayal. I lost family gatherings. I lost holidays. I lost the idea that blood means safety. But I gained something else. Clarity. The legal war. The legal process was brutal. Every document I submitted was questioned. Every memory was challenged. They tried to paint me as unstable, emotional, incapable. They had money for expensive lawyers. I had truth, and persistence. I spent nights learning legal language, reading case law, understanding how manipulation works not just emotionally, but legally. Slowly, cracks began to form. One cousin contradicted another. Dates didn't align. Paper trails told a different story than their words. Greed makes people careless. The cost of fighting back. There were days I wanted to quit. Days when the stress made me physically sick. Days when the idea of justice felt like a lie people tell themselves to survive. But then I remembered my mother. Her discipline. Her resilience. Her belief that strength isn't loud, it's consistent. So I kept going. What justice really looked like. In the end, the court ruled partially in my favor. Some assets were recovered. Some accounts were frozen too late. Some money was gone forever. My relatives avoided prison, but not consequences. Relationships shattered. Reputations collapsed. And the truth followed them quietly, everywhere they went. As for me, I didn't feel victory. I felt peace. Healing takes longer than revenge. Money can be replaced. Time cannot. I spent years rebuilding my life from a place of emotional exhaustion. Therapy taught me something important. You can grieve the living just as much as the dead. I wasn't just mourning my mother. I was mourning the family I thought I had. Why I'm telling this story? I didn't share this story for sympathy. I'm sharing it because this happens more often than people think. Inheritance disputes. Family greed. Quiet manipulation disguised as help. If this story reaches even one person before they make the same mistake, then my silence was worth breaking. What I know now. Protect yourself legally. Never sign documents while grieving. Never confuse kindness with loyalty. And remember, the people closest to you know exactly where to hurt you the most. After months of endless legal battles, sleepless nights, and a heart weighed down by grief, I finally felt a shift. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like the first hint of sunlight through a stormy sky. The more I dug into the documents, the testimonies, and the timeline of events, the clearer it became. The lies of my relatives were unraveling. And once truth begins to reveal itself, even the most carefully constructed facades cannot hold. The first breakthrough came from a small, almost insignificant detail. A date on a bank statement. A simple oversight. One transaction recorded earlier than it should have been, one signature that didn't match official samples. My lawyer called it a tiny thread that could unravel the entire fabric. I called it hope. We pursued that thread relentlessly. Every transaction, every notarized paper, every whispered phone call, it all painted the same picture. My relatives weren't just greedy. They had planned everything meticulously, anticipating every move, exploiting every weakness, counting on me being too heartbroken to notice. And yet, in their arrogance, they made mistakes. Mistakes that I, armed with persistence, evidence, and a deep understanding of their deception, could now expose. The court hearings were intense. Each session was a test of endurance, a battle of wills. They had top lawyers, and I had the truth. I realized quickly that truth, when presented correctly, has a weight no amount of money can counter. On one particularly tense day, the courtroom was packed. Relatives whispered among themselves, trying to intimidate witnesses, trying to project confidence. But their smiles were brittle. Their composure faltered. And that's when the momentum shifted. An expert in document forensics presented side-by-side comparisons of the signatures. The forged ones were obvious under scrutiny. The dates on several official documents didn't align with hospital records or travel logs. My mother's handwriting in earlier drafts was consistent, calm, deliberate, unmistakably hers. The falsified papers? Hasty, anxious, and inconsistent. And then came the testimony of the person they thought they could erase from history. My mother's former assistant. A quiet, composed woman who had worked with my mother for over 15 years. She spoke with precision, clarity, and an unwavering sense of loyalty. She described in detail how my mother had made every decision consciously, thoughtfully, and with me in mind. She confirmed that all legitimate documents had been prepared months before my mother's passing and that no undue influence had ever occurred. She detailed my mother's conversations, her intentions, and her fears about my relatives. The room was silent. Every eye turned toward my relatives, who now appeared vulnerable, exposed. I remember the moment clearly. The judge paused, reviewed the evidence, and asked for clarification on multiple points. My lawyer presented each discrepancy with methodical precision. One by one, the narrative my relatives had crafted fell apart. And then, the unexpected twist. One of my cousins, the one who had been most vocal in court, confessed privately to our lawyer that they had falsified documents because they feared losing everything. That confession, combined with the forensic evidence, was the final nail in the coffin. When the ruling came, it was comprehensive. The forged will was declared invalid. All illegally transferred assets were to be returned to me. The court formally recognized the deliberate actions of my relatives as fraudulent and manipulative. While criminal charges were considered, the main focus remained the restitution of my mother's estate. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Relief was accompanied by an unfamiliar feeling. Clarity. A sense of peace, of understanding, of seeing the world and the people around me clearly. Rebuilding was not instantaneous. Many of the recovered assets had been dissipated or were tied up in complex legal processes. Banks were cautious. Some funds were gone forever. But I no longer felt powerless. I had the foundation to start again, not just financially, but emotionally. The aftermath was sobering. Relatives who had betrayed me faced social consequences. News spread through extended family circles. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to restore. And I realized something crucial. The people who betrayed me were never truly family. Blood does not equal loyalty. Shared history does not guarantee honesty. I took time to reflect. I sought therapy, meditated, and spent hours walking alone, thinking about what had happened, what I had lost, and what I had gained. And I gained perspective. I realized that while my mother's money had brought out the worst in some people, it had also revealed the best in others. Friends who stood by me, lawyers who fought tirelessly, and even strangers who offered guidance and support, these people proved that integrity and kindness still exist. I rebuilt my life deliberately. Not recklessly, not in haste, but with careful intention. I invested in ventures I understood. I surrounded myself with people I could trust, who valued honesty above convenience. And I learned to guard my heart. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. I learned that vulnerability is a double-edged sword. It allows love, but it also invites exploitation. That grief can cloud judgment, but clarity can return if one persists. That betrayal hurts, but it can also teach lessons money never could. Years later, I look back and see the path clearly. I see the choices I made, the mistakes, the lessons, the moments of despair, and the moments of triumph. And I see my mother's wisdom woven through it all. Her belief in me was never misplaced. She knew I could handle adversity, even when I doubted myself. She understood that character matters more than wealth. That resilience, integrity, and honesty are the true inheritance. I no longer mourn the relatives who betrayed me. I mourned them enough while they were alive in my life. Now, I simply accept that they are not part of my world. My mother's legacy is more than money. It is the example of a life lived with courage, intelligence, and foresight. It is the lesson that family is chosen as much as it is given. It is the understanding that integrity cannot be stolen, even if possessions can. I share this story not for pity. Not for applause. I share it because there are countless others in the world, silently suffering, who trust blindly and are blindsided by greed. To anyone listening, I say this. Protect yourself legally. Understand every document you sign. Observe actions, not words. Actions reveal true intentions. Value people who demonstrate loyalty consistently. And remember, money can be stolen. Trust and integrity cannot. In the end, I emerged stronger. Not wealthier in the shallow sense, but wealthier in knowledge, resilience, and clarity. The wounds will always leave a scar. That is life. But scars are proof that we survived, that we learned, and that we have grown. If my mother were here, she would not want me consumed by anger or regret. She would want me to live fully, consciously, and honestly. And that is exactly what I do. I invest in my passions, nurture relationships that are genuine, and never take for granted the people who show true care. Money can vanish. Betrayal can hurt. But truth, integrity, and love, those endure. The lesson I carry forward is simple. Treasure the people who are worthy, question the ones who aren't, and never allow greed to define your relationships. Every day, I honor my mother not with wealth, but with choices. Choices that reflect her wisdom, her courage, and her unwavering faith in me. This chapter of my life is closed, but the story, the lessons, the memories, the resilience, will guide me forever. And as I look forward, I do so with clarity, strength, and an understanding that not everything that glitters is gold, and not everyone with blood in common is family.